Okie doke. All right, that'll have to do for now. So hi, welcome. We have had some requests for hips. Cool. Some hips in the front, some hips in the side, some hips in the back, some low back. A lot of different things, hips and back. And lots of us need those things. So we're gonna try to do this very, very, very accessibly because the cues for that area of the body assumes a certain level of being able to hip hinge, to be able to bend knees, etc. So let's start with the butterfly, which can be done. Let's pretend that, let's go from the least adaptive to the most adaptive. Least adaptive, you probably already more or less know, right? You sit in the middle of some place, you put your feet together and you put your knees wide. The closer your heels are to your butt, the more you can hold your feet and actively push your knees down. But for a lot of people, that causes some weird SI joint pain and is not particularly comfortable, and for a lot of people, it's not accessible at all. But if that's you, you can go ahead and do that. Hold your feet, knees go down on purpose. You can be rounded into it, or you can be lifted up out of it. So that would be, you can just simmer with that while I talk to everybody else. Okay, so now we go to the least accessible and we'll work our way from there. So least accessible, you're like sitting somewhere because you can't even get on the ground. All right, and you have a lower surface that you can work with, the surface that is lower than the seat that you're in. And from there, you can put your feet together and let your knees go out wide. If you can't do both at the same time, you can always do one. If your ankles round a little too much, you can always grab a strap and put it underneath and support by holding the strap. Okay, if you're in your butterfly pose at this point and you want to add something to it, you may be able to twist. All right, for some people, twisting is a bigger proposition than it is for other people. So let's give some specifics to that. Your hips are not going to move here because they're seated, therefore they're kind of pinned into place. So this twist that's happening is going to be happening from your rib cage up. You'll lift up, lengthen to your spine on your inhale. From your rib cage, you'll begin to twist back. You'll feel the back of your shoulder, your lat area contract, and then you can extend your arm if you want to. From there, your gaze can stay forward or contract with the arm that's opening, and you can go in both directions, but you want to try to keep it from the navel up, more or less. So now we've done two different butterfly variations. Here's a middle ground. You're on the ground. You have your back against a wall or something to support your back. Feet together, knees wide. Knees are up high and they're not going to go anywhere. Support your knees where they land, and over time they will go down a little bit, in which case you can drop your prop down and support in this new location. If you haven't twisted to the other side yet, you can go ahead and twist to the other side. Remember, you're up nice and tall. The twist is happening from your rib cage across, and you'll feel it in the back of the opposite side shoulder as well. All right, if you're twisted, bring it back to the middle. Regardless of where you have been, we're going to sit with this for another 5 breaths. If you have been upright the whole time, try rounding. If you round, consider supporting your head with something. I have my elbows on my legs here, but if I didn't need the props on underneath my legs, I could move blocks between my feet and my head, and I could hold my head with the blocks as I continue to use my elbows to push my knees down a bit. Okay, come on up. Let's do a side stretch from here. So this was something that we talked about. How do you modify a side stretch when you have like lower back issues? So now, whether you're sitting in a seat or you're sitting on the ground, just come to like a comfortable, regular-ish seat, okay? And slide a hand out to the side. If you're sitting in a chair, push, your hand out on the armrest or on the seat of the chair to help. Otherwise, hand out to the side, and this is gonna happen. We're gonna make it only happen from your rib cage up. So, take your hand, your free hand to the bottom of your rib cage on this opposite side. All right, and then we'll go, I don't know if y'all are mirroring me or not. This is my right side. So I'm gonna go down to my right side. Right hand down to the right ear down to my right shoulder, and left jawbone up to the ceiling. From here, I'm gonna keep my spine up really tall, and the only thing that is stretching laterally right now is my neck. The rest of my spine is straight up and down, okay? So from here, I'm going to push my ribs into my left hand and feel contraction in the ribs on the right side. And I'm not gonna go more than that. From the rib cage down is still vertical, and I'm just seeking a deeper side stretch in my T-spine and in my neck by contracting the ribs on the right side to get a stretch in between the ribs on the left side. Come on up. Switch your hands out, left hand down, right hand to your ribs on the right side. Nice and tall spine, and then your left ear goes down to the left shoulder, and your right jawbone goes up to the ceiling, and it's just in your neck. And then push your ribs into your right hand, contract your ribs on the left side, and keep everything from your rib cage down vertical. Also, with this elbow over here on the right, you can kind of tell in your periphery whether it's tracking forward or not, which is the most common fault in terms of spine, right? People tend to round a little forward when they're going lateral, and you don't want that to happen. Come on up. Okay. Hands back behind you. Give your chest a quick stretch. Grab either your strappy object, your belt, or the edge of your mat. Send your knuckles down. Send your shoulders down. Lift your chest up and roll your shoulders onto your back. Just get a quick stretch. You can drop your head down. You can lift your chin up. You can twist your head and neck one direction and then the other, but don't bend it laterally if you're twisting, or you can bend it laterally if that was working for you before, but don't twist it. Okay, so we're gonna go forward again, like we have done in the past, because deep forward holds are super important. So again, I'm gonna start you, like you can just go right into it if you need less modifications, which would mean basically keep your legs in a crisscross applesauce for now, and put a block or a prop out in front of you. Start up higher with your head supported, and you're looking for a rounded spinal position, spinal flexion from bottom to the top of the spine. And you can then put a hinge at the hip to take you deeper and deeper down, but watch real quick before you go too far with it. As you're approaching that end range where you're rounded and you're hinged, you have to emphasize the flexion from your upper T-spine into your cervical spine such that that forehead is not what is touching the ground. I'll move this arm out of the way. It's more toward the top of your head that touches the ground. Okay? So that's where, if you're going straight into it, that's where you're working toward. Don't force it. Inhale, balloon out your lungs, stretch your back body, stretch in your ribs. You're not going to go deeper if those things are tight. You're not going to go deeper if your hip flexors are tight, and you have to work past those blockages to go very far down. So even if you have nice spinal flexion and hip hinge. So now we're going to address all the way at the far end of that spectrum. Let's say you're seated in a chair, you can't get out of a chair. Then, actually I need to go get a second chair for this. Other end of the spectrum. You sit in your chair and you're gonna emphasize the stretch from the rib cage up like we just did with the lateral. So you're not gonna worry about hip hinging, but you will lean as far forward as you can, and when you can't lean anymore, if there's no such thing as a more rounding forward, you just put your head on a prop and you focus on sort of making the ribs and neck be held by the props and bowed out in the back. Protracted shoulders, spinal flexion from the rib cage up. But really just focus on the head being supported so the shoulders can descend away from the ears and you can relax the muscles in your upper back. Even for people who are on the ground and forward folded and hip hinged deeply, at some point, the upper back starts to talk to them. And you know, if you're in the middle, of course, you use whatever props are nearby, from a wall to a couch. It's applying these same principles, but anywhere from point A to point B, okay? There's no right or wrong way to modify poses. Okay, let's say you're all the way down. We'll give it a couple more breaths down there. What are some things that you can do once you're down there to refine? You too can slide your shoulders away from your ears. That's going to give your neck more length. And when your neck has more length, you can round it more. You have to actually use the muscles in the front of your throat to get that nice rounded back of neck position. Likewise in the chest. And you are really, really focusing on breathing into your low back here. Okay? So slowly come on up. We had a request for quads. There's a lot of different ways that you can approach the quads. So first, we will start with a kneeling variation. For some people, merely kneeling can be a quad stretch, quad and psoas stretch, right? So you can start kneeling, everything together, and just sit. If that's giving you a quad stretch, then you can stay. Okay? Let's say you want a little bit more, but this is kind of like talking to you, but you want to progress a little bit. Slide. This couch is a good position behind. I don't have to make a bigger prop because this is already gonna prop me. But I can open my knees up a little bit wider and I can start to lean back. And that gives a longer line. What you're doing here is you're closing around this joint of the knee. And then how long you get around this sort of fulcrum basically is going to determine how big of a stretch you get. If you're tight too, will also determine it. So right now, when it's just from the top of the quad through the knee, that's the only tissue that's involved in the stretching. Over the knee is just a bone and ligaments, right, and tendons. So when you start to lean back and you start to open up this line from the knee through the hip and up to the rib up in here, or even beyond, then you start to get a much deeper stretch. So you can scoot your knees away, lean back more, squeeze your butt muscles, lift your hips up, and then you start to get a more integrated and deeper stretch. And you can continue that as long as it feels good. Eventually, if you want, you can create a prop situation where you lean back to your props. Butt is on to make sure that this doesn't go into your low back, but rather it stays in the quads. So I'm supporting myself in my middle back here with the props, and my butt is on so that I'm not in my low back, even though I'm in a somewhat back bendy shape. All of this is a very light stretch through the abs, bigger stretch in the quads. Some of these, it really just is nice to just stay. Okay, let's come up a bit. Actually, if you need to stay there, you just stay there. Let's do next round, next level. There's so many. So let's go to a supported lunge. Some people might not be able to do this one, and there's not really great modifications for it. So I'll get you in it and I'll show you like an approximate modification. So use your blocks underneath your hands, or your supportive props underneath your hands, and you'll step let me go the other leg out in front of you. And then if you're stuck back here, right, in a sort of a 90-90 lunge, you're not gonna get a ton out of that back leg. So in theory, if that's where you are, you would be better off backtracking to where we just were in a double saddle, which is what the pose was we just did. But if you can, step your front foot forward, lean your hips forward, close the knee in your front leg, squeeze your butt in your back leg, and then you just hang your head down. You'll start to get a very integrated stretch from your left knee all the way through the entire front of the hip, and you can stay down and you get that stretch, or you can keep the butt somewhat scooped underneath you and engaged, walk your hand up, and then the other hand up to your knee, and you can go into as big of a back bend here as you want to. My back does not want to do a back bend right now, so I'm not going to force it, but you could be, doing the whole big circle shape. If you have enough range in your quads that you're over the kneecap on that back leg, and you don't want to do a big up and over back bend, but you still want more in the quad, then you can bend your knee, reach back. You also have your straps that you can use to reach back. Lasso the foot with the strap. All right. Not doing a good job of lassoing right now, but we'll pretend like I just did that. Put it on the ground. Put the ankle over. And then go back into the lunge and just take the strap with you, all right? And then you can close the heel into the butt more. If you can hold the foot, you close the heel to the butt. Then you lean back into it more, and that's what gives you the stretch. You can see the lines. If you look at it in terms of lines, all right? So if you're doing the other side, you can go ahead and set it up and do the other side. If you're still wondering what is an approximation of doing a low lunge like that, I'll show you over here. A butt cheek sits on, right? And then the other leg goes back. And this can approximate that stretch. Still have to have a certain level of openness through the front of the hip, because if you're down here, right, and the knee is down, it's not gonna give you enough that it would really warrant doing it this way versus going back and just doing a double saddle. But if you can get the leg back, if it's like a strength or balance thing, you just need to want that support, you can do it from seated in a chair as well, like a regular chair, not just a sofa. Other leg, right? Lean it forward. Notice here, if I were to be, like there's sort of a tendency of the front hip to want to lead, and here you can see my two butt cheeks. In theory, you want to see no butt cheeks, only one side hip. And that is an indication that your hips are square. Front hip back, back hip a little forward to square into it. If you don't do those things, is it terrible? Is it going to hurt you? Once, no. But doing it repetitively with a not neutral hip position will create imbalances. So over time, it will cause a problem. All right, wherever you are with it, let's move on from there. Okay? So we sort of did inner thighs, and we've done the front of the hip a couple different ways. We've done an accessible forward fold with a couple different variations. So I guess we should do broken down pigeon. Everybody loves that one. Okay, so this is gonna target a couple of different places in your outer hip and in your butt, and can also become a quadricep stretch. Seated, you can just end up doing a figure four. We can circle back to that. From the ground, you splay your legs. And I'm gonna turn slightly. All right. This butt cheek is fully grounded. Like there is no, I couldn't slide a piece of paper from about, a palm past the knee all the way up. It's sealed down to the ground. And this back leg is splayed, and the knee can be anywhere that's comfortable. This in and of itself might be a stretch. There's a little bit of internal rotation going on, and if that's the case, you can stay. Here is a sofa. There's a higher up surface. If this is intense for you, all right, you just cozy up to something that is relatively high up, and you lean forward and you get the stretch in the front leg and a little bit less in the back leg. You can always open the back leg up and stay kind of emphasized in the front leg. And here you have, this is a very nice pregnancy modification for pigeon, and this is a very supported, focusing on the front hip, because I'm not getting a ton out of this back leg. So there's that. If you're going forward incrementally without a very high up front prop, you lean yourself down to the ground. You still prop yourself up with the block. And you then just continue to bring more weight down. Over time, if you get the green light from your body, start to send your back leg back. And then look at it and send it further back to the side, right? So you don't want it out wide, you want it directly back behind you. And most people make the mistake of having it behind them, but a little bit wide to the side. Like even if you look at me right now, if my right leg was all the way directly behind me, It feels like it's directly behind me, but it's not, because you can see it sticking out to the side, right? So I've got to get my leg way more to the left. Now it's all the way back behind me, and that wound up the stretch in my front hip like another 25% of intensity. So now I'm just going to prop myself up and breathe into it. As you get yourself down to the ground, if you make it down to the ground, you want to be active. So you want to stretch your arms all the way forward and your leg all the way back, so that you're taking up as much possible surface area, and gravity has that much more surface area to act upon. So we'll be here for about 5 more breaths. Siri, are you doing a broken down pigeon?
Sorry, I don't understand.
Of course you don't. Okay, come on up. Stretch it out, other leg. So flippity flop the knees to the other side. Back leg goes back, front leg is bent, butt is down all the way on that front leg. And then you decide how hinged or not hinged you want to be in between your torso and that front hip. And you go down to that appropriate level with support. And as the intensity becomes manageable, you send your back leg long, roll it underneath you more internal rotation, and make sure that it ends up truly behind you and not a little bit out to the side. If you make it all the way to the ground, really, really, really get your arms long. That back outer hip should be turned on. So you can relax into it and you lose the stretch. If you squeeze the outer butt muscle, it pushes the front of that back hip down to the ground, and again, amplifies the intensity of the stretch in your front hip by about another 5 to 10%. All right, come on up. Come on to your hands and your knees, if you can. And here's 2 ways to get the outer hips. So I've got my hands way out in front of my shoulders, and I can sag both of my hips to the one side, and then the bottom hip is getting an outer hip stretch. This is maybe a little bit more accessible. You can then go to the other side, you can hold it, or you can go back and forth. Another way to do the same thing is pull your hands underneath you. Same thing, and a little bit more and better, in my opinion. Slide your right leg straight back, slide your right leg across to the left, kick through the right heel, look over your left shoulder. And you'll feel it in the outer right hip. You may also feel it in the outer left hip. Okay, if you're doing this side, but 2 different sides, do the other side to even yourself out. Hello. Hi. Okay, and then just have a seat for a second. So, methodologies wise, cruising through all of those shapes in a 30-minute time frame is not like the most ideal. If I were doing this for myself and like I was very, very tight in one of those areas, I would only be doing that one shape and I would probably be doing it for 10 minutes and I would be using I would be doing the most supported version so that I had the ability to ease into it extremely gradually because your body is very smart. And if you allow it enough time with enough support that you relax gradually, it kind of will anticipate where it's going to relax next. And some of these shapes really, especially with the quads, they're such big muscles, 5 or 10 minutes in one of those shapes really is like, then you're finally getting to it. Being in it for even 2 minutes is not going to be enough, although 2 to 3 minutes, you're starting to be able to also gently remold some of the fascia as well as the muscles. Anything less than that, it's only muscles that are getting the benefits of the stretch. So we did a lot of different variations so that this is like so that you can kind of come back to this and pick the ones that are the most effective. There are so many more stretches for the outer hips, for the inner thighs, front of the hips, for the back of the legs, different variations in forward folds. I mean, truly, 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 and people really need these. So y'all let me know how you want me to handle it moving forward. If you like having it this many variations to try, great. We can continue to do this with different poses. We can come back to this exact same series with the assumption that you've done some of it on your own. Lots of different ways to do it. So please hit me up in Limber Legion so that we can chat and create what is going to be a format that works the best for people to take agency of these shapes in their own bodies for the maximum benefit. Okay? Thank you, thank you. See you in the den.